Hey, Jurgen, how you doing? Paula here. Thanks
I am
for
doing good. Yeah.
giving me your time. I wanted to just record a little bit here talking about our crowdfunding round, and so people can hear it straight from you, not just the materials on the website about what we're up to.
Yeah.
So I think 10 minutes, 15, let's just see and give people a little bit more info on our thinking
Mhm.
behind it.
Sure. What's
So
the
we got it.
first question you want me to answer?
Okay, so I've got a few slides. I'll pull these up so we have something good, pretty to look at. And the first question I have is talk about this idea of continuous crowdfunding. You did a blog post on it recently, and yeah, talk a little bit about that. How do we make crowdfunding more agile?
Yeah, sure. In all my conversations with startups and scale-ups around Europe, at least, because that's where I travel around mostly, and on my reading, I noticed that the funding approach to startups seems still pretty traditional from an agile perspective. There's a big design upfront, huge pitch decks created, and then lots of meetings and trying to predict so everything that's going to happen in the next year and year and a half, and setting a milestone for a year or year and a half into the future. And then if you're successful after lots of meetings, you have this huge amount of money on your bank account that you don't need in the very first month, because it's going to deplete over the next 12 to 18 months. And it reminds me of how we released software in the 90s. Those
Yeah,
were
yeah,
big releases. The shrink wrap software was released once every year or year and a half or something like that. And then you had similar cycles. But we have moved beyond that, thank God. In agile software development, we aim for continuous deployment nowadays, where you can release software at any time at the touch of a button. And so I've been thinking, how can you apply the same idea to funding? Because it seems to make sense to only acquire funds at the moment when you need them, and not have this huge pile of cash on your bank account that you don't need right now. So reduce the cycles, and the extreme would be continuous funding, of course, where at any
yeah.
moment you can sell some shares in your company only when you need them. So that would be pull instead of push. That would be the ideal. But the journey towards that extreme from the traditional way to continuous crowdfunding would be the agile journey, right? That will be trying to make those cycles shorter and shorter. And I think we're already doing quite well if we could make them quarterly cycles instead of annual or even longer cycles, and then maybe learn from that. As we say in the agile world, if something hurts, do it more often. Well, funding hurts. Funding hurts quite a bit.
Yeah, I
So
remember last year.
yeah,
It
the
took
idea is to do
three
it all.
months, a long time, a lot of your time and my time, and
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Yeah. So
yeah,
instead of doing this for a couple of weeks or even months, and then spending all the rest of the time on spending the money and then doing it again, you should always be funding. Always a portion of your time you spend on the funding process, but it would be spread out among all the other activities that you're doing.
cool. And I was going to ask you this question later, but I think now's a good time to ask it, Jurgen. So we had our funding round last December through February, and we
Yeah.
raised the funds for this year, which is now coming to an end. We've made a lot of progress. So how is this funding round, or how is this going to be different? If people want to invest this round, how is it different than last round?
Well, the last time we had two approaches. Both were crowdfunding, but there was crowdfunding for Europe was done through the Cedars platform,
Yep.
and the crowdfunding outside of Europe was done through our own foundation, because we have a foundation that owns a significant chunk of shares.
Yeah.
And that was necessary because Cedars was legally only capable of handling Europe and nothing outside. So we said, okay, well, we have this foundation anyways that we use for other purposes as well. So why not use that foundation for everyone outside of Europe? And I noticed actually that would work pretty well, quite flexible actually. The mechanism is almost the same. There's hardly any difference between the seeders approach versus the foundation approach. They're just different, what they call special purpose vehicles in the legal financial terms, that own shares on behalf of the crowd, and then those special purpose vehicles, they vote on behalf of their certificate holders, and everything is legally tight and nicely arranged. This time we decided, or we discussed with the team, and I decided ultimately that we wanted a more continuous approach to crowdfunding. That is something that Seeders does not provide at this time. We cannot say, well, at any time we just want to sell a couple of shares whenever someone comes by and say, yeah, I would like some. Seeders doesn't do that.
No.
And on the other hand, we also have still remaining shares in the foundation that have not been sold yet. So we have a pool of unsold shares that we can still tap into. That means that if we sell those, there is no dilution of any investors who have jumped in, who joined us before. They have exactly the same ownership as they had before, because the foundation owns a chunk of the shares that have not been sold yet, and we're now depleting those, and that's going to take a while still before that is gone. And only then after that we could consider issuing new shares, and that would lead to dilution, but then we're talking about late next year probably.
Yeah, once we're scaling and bringing in the dollars. Okay, great. That makes sense. So yeah, and it's a 3-month, I think our what we're trying to raise right now is 3 months worth of revenue, right? So we're raising a smaller amount.
Indeed. So in theory, we can raise any amount at any time, because we have this pool of shares that are unsold. Any person at any time could come along and say, hey, I would like some ownership. And then we say, yeah, fine, you sign this document, we're done.
Yeah.
But it does make sense from a psychological perspective, and also for the team itself, to have a cadence, a rhythm, and to set ourselves a target, and then to measure ourselves for that target. Let's see, did we make it? Did we not make it? What was the problem? And like with OKRs, objectives, key results, it makes sense to set yourself some goals, measure yourself according to those goals, evaluate yourself, and then go into the next quarter. So that's the main reason for the psychological effect, to say, well, let's do this funding thing per quarter. We set a goal per quarter, what we want to raise, and then next quarter we'll see how much we're going to need and how things evolve.
Great. And the last thing, oops, I hit forward. The last thing too, we were talking about having targets, giving our investors milestones and giving them a higher level of transparency, since we're funding for a shorter period of time.
Yeah. And that's pretty difficult, because we're in the product market fit stage, which is basically exploration. And that is trying to solve a problem of which you do not even know if there is a solution. So I often compare it to finding the exit to the woods. You don't even know how big the forest is. So you cannot say, I will be out of the forest by the end of the next day. How would you know without having any knowledge of how large the forest is? So that makes it very difficult to set targets for solving problems. If you could set a target for solving problems, they would have invented the cure for malaria long ago. Just set yourself a target and you're done. Yeah,
totally. And we're at Agility Scales. We are building something that's pretty much brand new. It's not. We're not just improving on an existing solution. So.
Right. If you have references, if you have reference cases, then you can say, well, this is how long they took to solve the problem. We're doing the same, but in a slightly different industry. Then it's pretty easy. But we have nothing to compare ourselves with in such an easy way. So it makes it very difficult to set the specific targets. We still try to set ourselves targets. Not trying to skip them, I will not blame ourselves for not having predicted correctly when we will be out of the forest, because that's just not how
Yeah.
it works.
Because and if for people that do decide to invest, we have like a 3-month roadmap, a product roadmap, what we want to accomplish, and we have metrics that we'll be delivering very often, so they can see that we're delivering on what we said we were. But it's a
Yeah, we
shorter
want to be
time
as
frame.
transparent as possible. Yeah,
Yeah,
as transparent as possible.
shorter
Everything is
time
going
frame.
to be on the blog,
Yeah,
and yeah, people can lean in and say, give us suggestions on how we could improve.
yeah,
I look forward to that. But the focus is going to be on usage of the platform and the app, and
yes,
retention. Those are the most important metrics to focus on when you're in product market fit phase.
yeah,
You want to know that people are actually using your product.
yeah,
The one question that we get all the time, that I get all the time, is like, how many users do you have?
yeah,
That is the wrong question to ask for a startup who is in product market fit phase. That's the
yeah,
right question to ask when you're scaling, but we're not
correct.
scaling. So why would you
Yeah,
scale something that is not finished, that doesn't work yet? First, you have to make sure that it works.
make sure
And for
everybody's
that,
raving about it and getting the
right.
value. Yep.
So you want actually as few people as possible, but then who give quality feedback
Yeah,
about usage, about retention, so that you work with a limited set of people that you can give all attention, understand their user behaviors, and
yeah,
then once that works, then in the next stage you can start scaling up, and then the number of people is going to be important.
yeah. Well, good. That now's a good time then to talk about that. Let's talk about, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and then what's our solution? Do you want to just
Well,
remind people of those
sure. Yeah.
bits?
I just told someone this morning again, and do all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, in short, I want to have a more gamified experience, a more adventurous feel to the exploration and usage of agile practices. As we've noticed in the last few decades, we teach people to be agile with 2-day classes and certifications and training and everything, and all of that seems to be rather dull. It is not exciting, and I want to know if there a better way to change people's behaviors, and I think there is, because a lot of people have changed their behaviors through the use of smartphones and
oh yeah,
tablets. Um,
absolutely.
I have completely changed the way I consume music. I changed the way how I consume video and read books and everything.
And what about
Uh,
work habits? Work habits
yeah,
too.
so
Yeah.
that should I want to figure out, is it possible to change work habits through an app and a platform,
Hmm.
rather than only 2-day classes and then hoping for the best. I'm not saying that there will be no 2-day workshops anymore, but I
Hmm.
think they're not enough. The 2-day
Right.
workshops, they could be the starting point, but then people should go home with an app and a platform to practice what they've learned, and then there should be gamification and adventure and fun, and basically people should feel rewarded for being better
Yeah.
agile.
Do you want to talk about the top-down versus bottom-up concept as well? This slide
Definitely.
talks a lot about, organizations are desperate to get
Yeah,
their, innovate.
yeah.
That's what they do. They train people, they roll out methodologies.
Exactly. And when you look at most business models, let's face it, most of them sell to the top of the organization. They sell to the management and the
The
executive level,
solution providers, yeah.
whether it is training of all the employees, of frameworks that scale, or whatever. There are big bucks to be made. Consultant fees is
Yeah.
always being sold to management. That is top down, and then the people are being asked to buy into whatever the management is paying for. I think we should try bottom-up approach. Think we should
Yeah.
try an approach where anyone can download an app with their team to experiment with agile practices. And if they like what they're doing and the app seems valuable to them, then they could go to the managers and say, hey, we want the professional features. This requires us to have a credit card. In a similar approach as Trello and Slack and many other tools have become popular, because
Yeah.
they sold bottom up. Basically, they did not sell top down. Yeah, anyone can start using those apps with their teams, and then at some point they want you want to professionalize.
Yeah. And if you look at the biggest, the technology that's made the biggest impact in our lives, like they're platforms, right?
Yeah.
Airbnb.
Yes.
Airbnb is a platform, but the people have to be on it doing things individually for any value to be there. And
And
that's where we're starting. Yeah.
anything that has changed people's behaviors is what people have voluntarily decided to use
Yeah.
because it meant something. It solved the
There's even
pain.
Amazon, which has sort of taken over the world.
And
That's a marketplace. It's a platform for
yeah,
buyers and sellers. So
yeah. So I strongly believe in the bottom-up approach. Of course, at some point you need top-down support as well. Otherwise, the bottom-up approach stalls,
yes.
as everyone knows.
Yep.
But it starts with a groundswell movement from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I said, at some point, people will want to say, "Hey, there are these extra features for the corporate level. If we pay for those, then we have some interesting company-wide statistics or whatever, and
Yeah.
then
Or
you'll need
best
support
practices or
from
content. Yeah.
management."
Okay, cool. So then Mind Settlers, that's our platform app. And here's some screenshots about it. So where do you want to talk a little bit more about that and where we're starting with that? And
Yeah, so there's there's a little diagram in the left upper corner that is our value wheel that we use ourselves to separate basically four main chunks of features, and the first one is find ideas, which is browsing for ideas, which is what we're focusing on at this point. Make that easier. What are the latest agile practices and tracks to follow as a team or as an individual. So browsing, and soon we want the more passive form of consumption, where you get notifications based on your preferences and everything. So you say, well, I'm interested in these kinds of ideas with my team, and then the app should tell you that there's something new available. The second one is actually doing something with that information. So you're being inspired with the app, then you want to do these practices, maybe follow a track that says, well, if you do these 5 practices once per week for 5 weeks in a row, then you get this badge as a person, as an individual, or as a team. So that is actionable content. And the third part is tracking the value. How useful was this? Because we want people's feedback. So there's a value tracker, there's ratings, there are the reactions to each other. All of that is input on the content that we hope to get to make things better, also for the ones who provide the content, of course. And then last but not least, I want people to share their own learnings, because I want this to be a more democratic approach to offering practices. The traditional approach is that there are gurus and thought leaders who go around companies and they collect great ideas, habits from teams, and then they wrap them in methods and frameworks and disseminate them through to their classes with a certification. I want to sort of liberalize that with our team and say, well, anyone can have a great idea. Even if it's just one good practice that you have as a person or as a team, you should be able to say, well, this is how I do this particular thing with my team. I'm adding this idea to the app, to the platform, and from that moment, anyone can try it and then give you feedback and give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down and track the value of it. So that's sort of, it turns it from top down into peer-to-peer framework methods that we will be creating with each other, instead of asking the gurus to do that for us.
Yeah, and when we first started the company way back, a year and a half ago, we were saying, oh, we're focused on agile coaches and Scrum masters and software teams, really. But we're like, everyone's reinventing the wheel. They're all, they're in their organization, they're doing something fantastic. Maybe they share it on a blog, 3 people see it. We sort of want to make that stuff visible, so you can triangulate and find those people that have the same problem as you and have got some inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think that is the main, yeah. I think timing, we talked a little bit about the timing, Jurgen, of this concept. So why now? Why is it a good time for this kind of approach now? We've talked about it a little bit already, but I think it's
Well, I think platforms make a lot of sense nowadays. Apps on smartphones and tablets obviously are the way that people consume information and act
yeah,
on things happening in their environment. So that is totally obvious. Network thinking, peer-to-peer, instead of a top-down makes a lot of sense. You see that the nearly at the bottom, AI and machine learning is something that we want to look into in the future. As they say, they will become as ubiquitous as electricity in the future. Well, the only thing you need to do is build up data, and then you can pull AI out of the wall, basically, machine learning,
right.
to give you intelligent insight on that information, on the data that you have. And I look forward to that, to offering people suggestions based on the things that they have done with their team, and then have an AI
Yeah,
offer ideas about what they could be doing next. So a platform, machine learning, agility is all the rage nowadays. The scaling of agile is top of mind among CEOs all
yeah,
across the world.
that's true.
So it makes total sense.
Yeah. And I think, I think we are unique too, because we're talking about agile improvement cycles. We're not just giving people info and then leaving them to it. We're trying to capture the rest of that agile improvement cycle. And that's one thing that no one else is really doing. No one else has succeeded in really capturing what
Yes,
people are doing and making it visible to others.
there are lots of people involved in individual aspects of it, so that in a sense, there's nothing new, you could say, but they're all different solutions and different parties operating in
Yeah,
different parts of that wheel that we discussed. And we try to be the first one to make that sort of something cohesive, something that works as one experience.
yep.
So let's see if it works. We're doing our best.
Okay, great. And thank you, Jurgen. And we're sort of near the end. Anything else you want to say to people who might be considering investing? I guess I want to tell them you can go to agilityscales.com/invest and just get our
Exactly.
pitch deck and get all our information and see what you think.
Yeah, do that now. At this time, as I said, we're selling shares that we still have available, and we've decided not to increase the valuation of the company because we believe we still have plenty of evidence to provide that we're going in the right direction. So the price is the same as it was last time, but who knows? That might increase next year. I definitely hope so, because that would mean that we have achieved a significant milestone like product market fit, and we would start business model market fit next. Let's see what happens next year. Now is a good time, I think, to benefit from the fact that we still have some.
And I think we've got about 40. We've got over 200,000 euros that people are, they've come forward to say they're interested. So there's a nice. We'll see how long this lasts. It may be a few weeks. It may be a little bit longer. So good to have a look at it now while you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks, Jurgen. Let's close there, and I'll get this up online so people can see it and hear from you. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks, Paula.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Right. All right.
All right. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jurgen.
Thank
I'll get
you
that online.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.